You're listening to the Heart Lessons Podcast with me, Sarah Rieke. Real women, real stories, real faith. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm so glad to have you joining me here today. Today is Tuesday, October 16th, 2018, and you are listening to episode number 62 with my special guest, Deb Dougherty. If you've been listening to the episodes this month, you know that the heart focus here on the podcast is pregnancy and infant loss awareness. And Deb is such a sweet soul that can speak into this heart focus. She is the Perinatal Bereavement RN for the hospitals here in our local area. She's also a woman who loves Jesus, and she also has lost a baby herself. She lost her son Tommy a couple weeks before his first birthday. So Deb is just a wonderful person who can speak into this heart focus of what it is like to lose a baby, and then also what it is like to serve women who are entering into the pregnancy and infant loss community, a club that, as she says, we would never pick, but it is really important to find community in it. So Deb is just really wonderful to speak into that for all of us today. In our conversation today, we cover a little bit of everything, honestly. She shares her story of losing baby Tommy. She describes her job and how she serves women in the infant loss community here in our area. We talk about the difference between depression versus grief. And she also shares some ideas for keeping your baby's memory alive. Anything Deb and I mention today, you'll be able to find in the show notes. And there are actually a lot of things we talk about that are specific to our area, the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. That's in southeastern Virginia for anybody who isn't familiar. But my hope is by listing those resources on the show notes page, maybe it'll kind of trigger you to Google search your area and see if you have similar resources that can help you. So I will do my very best to curate a good show notes page for you to be able to find resources that can be helpful to you or to people that you love. Before we jump into my conversation with Deb, I just wanted to make a little note and just let you know that this is actually my first on-site interview, so I brought all of my recording stuff with me, and I went to Deb's office at the hospital, and that's where we recorded this episode. But the place where her office is located is actually the same hospital where I had Evie and Charlie and where I lost them, and the medical center right across the street is where I had all of my high-risk doctor's appointments. And so going there was a really just deeply emotional experience, just going to that parking lot again and walking that pathway up to the sliding doors where I just went in to have a baby and I came out without my baby. And so it was pretty emotional just to stand there. And honestly, it was a really beautiful kind of full circle moment for me. You may have seen me post about it. I think it was towards the end of August on Instagram. I talked about it a little bit, but, I would never have imagined that I would be back there willingly. Right after I lost Evie and then Charlie a few years later, I couldn't have imagined returning there for any reason, honestly, willingly and on my own, because there's just so much pain involved in really that location. There were a lot of tears shed and a lot of feelings, and it was just really, really hard to go through what I went through. But then standing there and going in to speak with Deb, it was like a full circle moment where the thing that had brought me such pain and a heartache is the same thing that brought me there several years later to create resources to help women who went through or are going through the same thing that I went through. And it was just a really beautiful picture of redemption and of what the Lord can do and how he can heal. Because I know many of you listening today who have lost babies, you think, what is life going to look like? I can't even imagine how good things can come from this because it hurts so much. And friend, I was there too. I promise you, in many ways, I'm still there. And there are triggers that can take me back there with a moment's notice. But I just share that with you today just to illustrate what God can do and the healing that he can bring. and how part of the beauty that can come from your pain is when you can help somebody else in theirs. And when you can reach back and say, I've been there, take my hand, and we'll get through this together. So I hope you know that my heart is in this episode so much, and it was such a privilege to return there and create this resource for you, for those of you who have lost babies, and for those of you who are wondering how this whole thing is going to turn out. This is for you. All right, friends, I'm so honored to introduce you to Deb Dougherty. Here she is. Deb Dougherty, welcome to the Heart Lessons podcast.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you on today. And this is my first on-location interview, so I'm very excited.
Welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Oh, man. Maybe if I had remembered the chords I was supposed to remember, we could be holding microphones. But
that's okay.
This will be fine. I won't tell my husband.
It'll all work out.
Yeah. It'll be great.
All works out.
So I'm really looking forward to, well, maybe looking forward is the wrong way to say it. I am very thankful to have your voice speaking into this infant loss series that we're doing for the month of October. And I would just like to start out, could you just give us a couple sentences, what your official title is here at the hospital, and just a couple sentences description of what you do here?
I am the perinatal bereavement nurse, registered nurse here at Centera Norfolk General Hospital. I also work with Centera Princess Anne, Centera Obici, and Centera Lee, and just recently started branching out to all the Centeras. My goal is to provide a consistent and compassionate standard of care for all our patients who have experienced a perinatal loss at any gestation and at any point of entry at any Centera facility.
Well, I imagine that you are especially good at your job because you yourself have experienced infant loss, and I'm sure that gives you, just a greater empathy. Would you give me the honor of hearing the details about your sweet little boy that you lost?
Thank you. My husband and I were pregnant with our fourth child, and when I was advanced maternal age, so that put me in a high risk category. So at 19 weeks, we had a level 2 ultrasound, and it was during that ultrasound that we discovered that he had some markers for Down syndrome and a congenital heart defect, and that wasn't news that we were expecting. And we grieved the loss of the perfect baby we were hoping for.
Yeah.
And then when he was born, we realized we had nothing to fear. And I feel like he really taught me a lot in that someone who has a disability is a person first. They're not their disability. He did have a congenital heart defect, and we needed to wait until he was bigger and weighed more before he could have his surgery. And during that time, we talked to other parents whose children had the same congenital heart defect. They had the same physician as we did, the same surgeon, same place. So even though he was having open heart surgery, we weren't expecting the outcome that we got. And initially, we were in the waiting room, and we got the call to meet the doctor and the surgeon and Tommy in the recovery room. And then within minutes, things changed, and they had a complication, and they couldn't get him off bypass. And he didn't make it through that.
I'm so sorry.
He was 2 weeks shy of his first birthday. And we were devastated because and it was so unexpected.
Yeah. Because it's a pretty routine surgery for a congenital heart defect.
Yes, and the surgeon never lost anyone. So we just really thought that, we were in good hands, and I'm not sure exactly why he didn't make it when other children have, made it through surgery. So
I'm so sorry. What was that? How did you process that shock? What was the next kind of emotional step for you?
I can still vividly remember that day, how when we walked outside, people actually had the nerve to go on with their day.
Yeah.
Like, don't you know that this amazing, amazing person just passed away? So that feeling of like shocked, like my life had stopped.
But everyone else has kept going.
Yes. And even the colors look different. But one of the things that I really hold on to is the social worker who brought Tommy into us after he had passed away. She was doing ink handprints and ink footprints for us, which to this day we treasure. My sister took and made kind of outline of his feet and his hands, and she would do like a wreath at Christmas time, so we've been able to use those prints just more than once, so that was like invaluable. And then she gave me a washcloth and asked me to wipe his feet off and wash his hands and feet. And initially I didn't understand why she was asking me that, and now I know why, because that was my last act as his mother. And so I'm so thankful that she gave that to me. When we have children, we have that innate need to care for our children, to protect our children, and we still want to hold on to that physical part and still do things for them. So I really am so grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so very sorry. How has the Lord brought healing to you from losing baby Tommy?
I'm going to do my best not to cry.
Oh my gosh, please, listen. If you cry, I'm going to cry, so it's fine.
I remember when we were in the main waiting room with all the other parents, and they pulled us into a small consultation room, so it was private, had a window, and they were telling us that it wasn't looking good, that they were doing everything that they can, and they were asking us to make these decisions, immediate decisions that parents have weeks to think about. But we were like, just do whatever you can, save his life, and we'll just deal with it when we get home, what we need to do. And I remember falling to my knees and praying and begging God, your will be done, your will be done. Because I just knew that would be his will. He was this beautiful, beautiful boy and made so many people happy. And he didn't make it. And so I struggled with that a little bit, like how could that be his will? So I questioned that initially, and it's been 14, it'll be 14 years in October.
Okay.
So I can kind of see why now, his short time on earth. We have since gone over to Ukraine and adopted a little girl with autism and Down syndrome, because over there, if they aren't adopted by their 4th birthday, they go to a mental institution, and their lives they don't have a very good quality of life, and we wanted to give someone a family who didn't have one. So a friend said to us, she said, Tommy's life gave Anya a new one. And then doing the work that I'm doing now makes me feel close to him.
Yeah.
I go into rooms sometimes when I'm working with my patients, and I can feel the presence of angels, and so.
Yeah. It's the redemption of your story. A little bit, a little piece.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, listen, tears.
I don't know how people can do this without God. It's even when I felt like he wasn't close, or he was far away, it was because of the block I put there, not him, and knowing that he is such a compassionate, huge God, that he didn't take that personally or get upset with, he was always there. And I know that when I am close to God, I'm close to Tommy, because Tommy's with God. So, it's hard to, I don't know how people who don't believe in God get through that.
I don't know. I do want to ask you, though, how do you help women who have lost babies process their loss and find hope if they don't have the Lord?
I have them just briefly, depending on if they've had a C-section, a vaginal delivery, or if there's complications and they're here on medication for a short while. So I don't get them throughout the different stages of grief. When I see them, it's pretty much still in the shock and denial phase. Like they can't believe this has happened, or they want to wake up from it's a bad dream they want to wake up from. But I guess for me, what I do is I just go into the room and I don't even, I introduce myself and I ask if I can sit down, but I don't really start asking a whole lot of questions because I want to see where they're at. And sometimes that silence helps them start
find words.
Yes. And then after that, it helps me to know them a little better and maybe assess what will work for what they're going through. And then I will tell them that I'm so sorry for their loss, and depending on what kind of questions they ask or what they might need, I give them, all our patients get information about counselors in the area who specialize in infertility and pregnancy loss and infant loss, as well as groups. And on this side and then across the water on the other side. So if that's something that works for them, it doesn't work for everyone, but they do have those resources that they can use, which that's what we did and we found helpful, because once you lose a child, you belong to this club that no one wants to belong to, and no one, as much as they try, they just cannot understand the pain of it. So I think for me and for my husband, the support group was good. And it was nice to be with other parents who have lost a child, but it had been a while, because it gave us hope that, okay, we're not going to feel this raw, intense pain forever. I don't think time heals all wounds, like they say. It just, you have to find a new normal. And give yourself time to grieve, and definitely don't stuff it. Because it'll always come back up.
I've heard, people do say time heals wounds, but something I like better is grief doesn't fade, it just changes.
Yes, that's good.
It's not like it's dwindling, it will eventually completely disappear. It's like it just changes. And like somebody has said before, like initially it's like you're carrying like an armful of boulders, and then you kind of put it in a backpack, and then you kind of put it in your pocket. It's like always there, but maybe the weight of it changes over time. And I just think that's a really helpful visual. It's like, if you're grieving and wondering why all of a sudden you can go right back, it's because it never left.
Right.
It didn't fade.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So how did you come to have this position?
I have been a labor and delivery nurse for 25 years. That's all I've ever done. And my husband's retired Navy, so we did travel every 2 to 3 years. So I've worked here, I've worked in San Diego, and I've worked up in New Jersey. And every once in a while, as a labor and delivery nurse, you do have patients that you take care of that lose a child. Most people say, oh, you have an amazing job, it's always so happy, and it's not always so happy. And so I did have experience with that. And then I went to a 3-day program that resolved through sharing sponsors, and it's a perinatal bereavement loss 2-day class, and then a coordinator position is an extra day, and it basically gives you the resources that you need to work in a hospital and provide that support to the patients, and then teach other healthcare providers to do the same thing. And it's a great resource. So I took that, and I was working at Chesapeake Regional at the time, so I was still a full-time labor and delivery nurse, and then volunteered as a bereavement coordinator there. Initially, I was kind of voluntold.
You have this qualification, so now.
And I didn't think I could do it. Initially, when I went back into labor and delivery, I couldn't take care of the families that had lost a child. And then I felt bad for that, because it felt like, my friends would say, oh, Deb, I'll do it for you, don't worry about it. And, trade assignments with me, but I felt guilty because I didn't want to be that nurse that didn't pull her weight. And then I could take care of the families because I could empathize, but it was when I took care of the babies, it just took me right back to that day, and I couldn't do it. And then over time, I finally was able to do that. And then initially when my nurse manager at Chesapeake Regional asked me if I would do this, I was like, I don't think I can.
Yeah.
And after taking the class and starting kind of revamping the program, because they had a program, but the person who did such a great job of putting it together was gone. And so it just kind of trickled down a little bit. So being able to get that back up to where it was before. And then Anne, who had the position here, she had basically created it, I think 28 years ago, and she retired.
Yeah.
And so this position was opened, and I applied for it and got the position.
Yeah.
And Centera wanted to change things a little bit because there was a lot of after you were discharged counseling where you would go back, and a lot of the emphasis now was really that piece of really getting to the, see the patients in the hospital room when it's happened, when they're here. Can't see everyone because I'm not here on the weekends in the middle of the night. And then training the staff and providing resources so that we all can work with these families and provide that compassionate care. And the nurses and staff, they do want to provide that care, and they're nervous because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
They're afraid of making their patients cry, so I reassure them they're going to cry.
Yeah.
Because it's very sad.
Yeah.
So just being there and giving them that space. So it's a huge program of support for the patient and also the staff, so the staff can give the patients that support.
That's great.
Yeah,
I think that's an important piece.
Yeah, I do too. And we collaborate as well with other organizations within the community. For example, Edmark. Are you familiar? Yes. And they do have a perinatal bereavement program too. And they will call me and we will meet with the family who has been given a diagnosis that's not compatible with life.
Yeah.
And so they're carrying a baby that they know is going to pass away. And so we get them over here and kind of talk about what their expectations are, and then I give them a private tour because you don't want to sign up for a tour of the hospital with all these pregnant mamas.
Yeah.
So we do that. So I work with the community too, and the resources are opening up.
Yeah.
My goal is to try and the bereavement or the geneticist too. They will call and ask if I will help out the patients as well. So
that's good. You're building up good resources and good support.
And
that's
help,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I know, Deb, that you are a believer and you find your hope in Christ. And as we said before, how do people do this without the Lord? How do you approach the topic of hope and helping someone find light if they want nothing to do with the Lord? If they're angry at the Lord, and given your position at a large hospital, it's not a religious affiliated hospital. So how do you provide that hope in Christ without being so forward about saying hope in Christ?
Again, I kind of take my cue from the patient.
Yeah.
And if she brings it up, and if she talks about being angry with the Lord, then I feel like that she's opened the door and we can talk about it.
Okay.
But I want to be there and meet the patient where they are, and I definitely will pray for them when I leave.
Yeah,
but if they don't bring up Christ, and bring up God, then I don't address that part of it.
Yeah.
The chaplain will come in, but the chaplain's there to work on some of their spiritual needs as well, but I don't know because everybody's so different. And I really feel like I need to meet the patient where she's at, and if I pray for her, God will take care of the rest.
I feel like you were just very patient and a good listener, and I don't know that everybody can have that and sit with somebody, just sit in their grief, and I admire that.
It was really hard at first.
Yeah.
Because when I was taught how important silence is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh. And so going in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to.
You want to do something,
exactly.
quote unquote, do something, yeah.
And then when I started just reminding myself, just be quiet, I saw it work. They start talking. And it's an honor. It's an honor to be with someone at their delivery.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be with someone in their grief. It's an honor to be with someone when they die. These are very, very, very big, huge events in someone's life, and you're a part of that.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's an honor to kind of create or be there and create that space if I possibly can.
How do you not carry the weight with you, or do you? How do you balance that?
That I've been here for a little over a year, so that's something that I learned to do, that self-care piece. Because as a labor and delivery nurse, you're not doing it as often. You may take care of someone who's lost their baby, and then you're doing the labor and delivery. So now this is pretty much focused on that. And initially I thought, I don't know if I can do this because it's difficult to always, it's so sad.
Yeah.
And then it just occurred to me, what's sad is losing your baby, and they need someone to help them. And so I always focus on that and do my best to take care of myself, on my own time.
Yeah.
But I look at it, yes, this is sad, but just think about where they're at, that intense pain. And I know what that's like, so that would be helpful.
Yeah. How do you handle a situation where the baby has passed away because of poor choices from the mother? That has to be so hard.
I get asked that question from nurses as well. And the way I look at it is that this person is a child of God, and even if they've done, like, say, cocaine and that had brought on labor, and that because of that the baby has passed away, I think this mom needs even more of our compassion because of the guilt that she must feel, and she has this sickness, this disease that she can't control, and she's not at that place to stop it yet. So I treat her just like all my other, and I think initially, to be honest, I did, but I don't anymore. Because I want to, again, be there for the patient and meet her where she's at, and that's all patients. And I don't feel like it's for me to judge her. Everybody needs our compassion, because that standard is a standard for everyone, that standard of consistent, compassionate care.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah. Wow. I imagine that would be hard, but just, grace, right? Grace for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do anything to help guide a woman's healing, or are you, for the most part, the initial visit when she's there in the hospital, or do you kind of follow her, check in on her for a little while? We do check in, and I would like to intensify that follow-up process if they want it by checking in on them more, and but at least a follow-up if they want it, that follow-up. And I have had a couple of patients who come and visit, and I let them know that I'm not a trained counselor. Right. But I would be more than happy to just, speak with them and talk to them, because it's been at their request, and they do come and they talk, and it's an hour pretty much where I just let them just kind of talk. And so then if they ask me questions about how, what should I do about this, or what should I, for example, how should I process my grief, I just give ideas. How about journaling, or, creating a scrapbook of memories, or, just give them some ideas and see what works for them. Yeah. For me, I know after Tommy passed away, because he had a congenital heart defect, and I had a daughter, well, we still have her, but she was 5 at the time, I was pretty busy and didn't have time to really do a scrapbook or baby book, and I really wanted that for him so that I can look through it. And I would put my daughter on the bus for school, and I would sit at the kitchen table, and I would light a light, it was his candle, and put on some music, and I would work that whole time on his scrapbook. And then I reached out to family and friends and invited them to add a page if they wanted to, and people started sending in pages. So I just felt that was very therapeutic for me. Yeah, huge. what other things, not necessarily have you done, but what are other suggestions for keeping your baby's memory alive? I know a lot of times a woman who has just lost her baby is afraid that she'll forget that baby, which you and I both know is an impossibility.
Right.
But just what is something that a freshly grieving mother could do to just keep that memory alive in a healthy way?
Things that help her to remember her baby, and someone who's maybe only 20 weeks doesn't have a whole lot. She might get some footprints. And so I recommend maybe a little corner of the room or having a candle. That works so well for us. And I make sure it's a big, tall candle.
Yeah.
And you can light that candle at events, Thanksgiving, Christmas. And that's a symbolic way of acknowledging your babies with you.
Yeah.
And I like the scrapbook idea. Journaling is another one. And, and a new thing that has just been, and I don't know for a newly grieving mom, but to acknowledge their child, they're wishing their child a happy birthday, and then they're asking people to pass it forward cards. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I know the idea of, like, the paying it forward kind of thing.
Exactly, that's what it is. Pay it forward, and then pay it forward, and then post it on social media with the hashtag
Happy birthday,
and then the baby's name.
That's very sweet, yeah.
And then, because parents want people to remember their baby, and they want to hear the baby's name.
Yeah.
Their baby's name, it's important. And people are afraid of saying the baby's name because they're afraid they're going to make the patient, their mom and dad cry.
Yeah.
Kind of like a vicious, they want to protect, and at the same time, they're hurting unintentionally because they're maybe avoiding so they don't make her cry or not saying the baby's name.
But yeah, that's really sweet. We did that after when my daughter that passed away at her 1-year-old birthday. We had like a week of kind of doing that sort of thing. And one thing, and I can't remember, I got this suggestion from somewhere. I can't take credit for it, but we left like bubbles at a park with a note that said, please take some bubbles and enjoy, and hashtag happy birthday Evie. And some families did, and it was really sweet to see, like, strangers like celebrating our girl's birthday. It was just really sweet.
I love that idea.
Yeah, it was really fun. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. Okay, so I know you're not a trained counselor, but you have experience with seeing lots of grieving individuals. What does healthy grief look like? And what is sort of depression versus grief? Because I think it's a fine line. I think they mirror one another very often. And when we see a loved one grieving, I think we can be afraid that they're depressed. But really it's just a process. So how can you speak into that?
When you asked that question, the first thing I thought of is when healthcare providers don't really know the stages of grief, and they don't realize that parents have that innate need to protect and take care of their children and socialize their children. If a mom says, I just want to be with my baby, they may think that she's suicidal. And really she's just expressing that very normal need of physically needing to be with her baby. So education is good. And a mom might want to give her baby here in the hospital bath, maybe change the clothes a couple of times. And people may not understand that, but that's taking care of that innate need of caring for their baby, that physical need. Everybody grieves so differently. So to create a space for them in that grief, when it kind of crosses the line, I think is when you get more of, over several weeks, the patient starting to really say, I really want to be with my baby, after the first few weeks. 3 months, for whatever reason, 3 months. And I think it's because their social support, their friends and their family go back to work and start carrying on with their lives, and they're still very much in their grief. And that is kind of a very difficult time in grief for families. And so I think if you're kind of getting around that mark and they start saying things like that, maybe I wish I could be with my baby, or if they're not eating or drinking like they should be, or sleeping too much or not sleeping at all, then it might warrant a visit. Because you have grief, and then you also can, you have signs and symptoms. You watch for signs and symptoms of postpartum depression. So basically you would hope that the family would notice if something's off and, encourage a visit to either a counselor or a physician. Physician first, because you always want to check it out medically, and then a counselor if that's something that the patient is up for. But they do have what they call complicated grief. And that is grief where I think it's after their first few weeks, they still have that intense, that's all they're able to do, all they're able to think about. And it really gets in the way of their day-to-day function, everyday living.
Does postpartum depression play a part in a woman who's lost a baby, like with the hormone fluctuations? Like, does something happen around 3 months that would kind of cause more intense?
The hormones need to get regulated again after pregnancy, and it does. And then those situations when it doesn't, you have postpartum depression. And then that's also a fine line from depression to psychosis, and those are the moms who, they're not thinking clearly anymore, and they've maybe done something to their kids because of that.
Yeah.
So they're screened heavily in the hospital and then at their postpartum checkup, what to watch out for and what to do.
Right. Is there a way that a woman herself could realize that I actually need help at this point?
Again, I think the signs and symptoms that you have of depression would be the same for the grief. When you're not sleeping and you're not eating, so you've lost weight, and all you can think about is your baby, and you're not wanting to go to activities. And again, grief, sometimes you're not going to want to, especially if there's a baby there.
Yeah.
So what I'm speaking to is an everyday, day in, day out, just want to be in your bed or on the couch, not wanting to do anything, at least over 2 weeks.
Okay. But like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's a little bit more healthy grief. It's not going to be one straight line out of there. It's kind of messy.
I know. I agree. I think it's like the ocean. It kind of comes in waves, and then the ocean is calm, and you're out there, and you turn your back, and all of a sudden you get hit by that wave that knocks you to the sand, on the bottom of the ocean. So
that's a great visual. Yeah. If you had sort of one final word to a woman who has lost a baby, what would you say to her to encourage her?
That the way she's grieving is just perfect for her. To be very careful and cautious of, especially if you're on social media groups, if a mom who may have been in the same situation, same time frame, same gestation, the situations are very similar. Don't compare yourself to her and how she's doing. The way you're grieving is perfect for you. And then if you're married or you're together with the baby's dad, to not compare your grief to one another, because that's going to be very different. Men grieve differently than women do, and now I can't put everybody in a category, but most men tend to grieve differently, and they compartmentalize. And they need to do that so they can go to work, and making sure they're still providing for their family is very important to them. And so what may appear that he's not grieving, he's going to work, and I don't see him upset or thinking or talking about the baby, but he is. Yeah. So to keep talking and doing your best not to compare how each other, or assume how each other's grieving, to give yourself that time to grieve and not to stuff it because it's painful. There's a tendency to want to maybe shop too much or be on, watch too much, just too much of anything so that you don't have to deal with that pain.
Like numbing grief. Almost.
Yes. And yes, so just be very cautious about that too. It's important to work on your grief. And it's work.
Yeah.
It's work. It's hard work.
Yeah. But maybe processing, even if you need to be quiet and alone, but processing by taking a walk or something. It's maybe better than just numbing in front of Netflix or something like that.
Although it's easy to want to do, and I completely
understand. I want to do that.
And it's okay to do it once in a while, but just as long as you're working on your grief and expressing it. And know, too, that after this, when there's another loss, that can bring you back. And so you may feel like, oh, no, I'm regressing, and, well, that's normal because it's a wound that's healed, but it's not perfect like it was before.
And it was reopened.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's hard. What are some of your favorite resources to help a woman, you said process your grief in a healthy way?
Well, for me, it was the support groups.
Yeah.
Definitely the support groups, and being with other families that have been through the same thing. I was very worried about my daughter, Megan, who was 5.
Okay.
And so we looked into play therapy, and we did that with her for a year. And then Edmark has a program which is amazing. It's called Piece by Piece, and we put her in that, and that's where they have trained counselors who work with children, and they do fun things like arts and crafts, and they don't really see it as, oh, I'm going to therapy, you know.
And it's just fun.
Yeah, it's fun, but they're still kind of working that's, on their grief, and they're with their peers who have also lost someone really important to them, and so they're not alone.
Yeah.
Because they go to school, their friends at school may not understand, and they have that need to express it too.
Yeah.
So I think one of the first things is making sure that she was okay, doing everything that I could, to help her through this.
Yeah. Is Edmark, they're not national, it's just here.
I think it's just here.
Yeah.
I would have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure, because I haven't heard it in other places.
It's a pretty amazing resource. I hope that they have things like that around the country.
It's amazing the resources that they have for our families, the things that they have, like if someone has a baby that has a poor prognosis and their siblings, the siblings get toys. They get a refrigerator full of food, and they just kind of think of, they even help them plan the funeral, which is so difficult. You've just been given this news and they're asking you all these questions,
Yeah.
So they are...
That you don't want to answer.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, I'll have to see if I can find links to see if there's something similar
in other
around
states.
the country. Yeah, in other states, because Edmark is really incredible. Yeah. All right, Deb, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the podcast if that's okay with you. And there's 2 questions I ask everyone who comes on the show. One is, as you are walking out the story God is writing for you, what's a heart lesson he's been reminding you of lately?
Oh my gosh. That he's always there, and there's a reason for what happens, and the reason why we're here, I believe, is to do his will and to be there for each other, and we don't know what that is, and so in order to know what he wants for you, you need to stay close to him. And so it's really important to continue going to church and reading the Bible. I think if you kind of stray from that, then I think that you kind of stray from knowing what God wants for your life.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that's really important. And sometimes the tendency is to do that, especially if you're upset with God because he allowed it to happen. Yeah.
But even in the seeking, sometimes that's enough to keep you close. Like even in the seeking and the questioning, sometimes that's enough to keep that relationship open.
I think to ask your church too, if they have resources. Some churches have Grief Share. Grief Share, and I know at Grace they have Celebrate Recovery, and they're thinking of adding a grief portion to that. Grief support there too. So see what kind of support your church has, and to reach out to them.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, last question, Deb, just for fun. What's something you're looking forward to?
Oh my gosh. Let me think. Oh, grandbaby.
Oh my goodness.
Is it bad to talk about grandbabies when we're talking about grief?
No, if that's what you're looking forward to, that's awesome.
Yes. My son, we have 2 older boys.
Okay.
And they're both married. One son, Wesley, and his wife Ot's in Japan.
Okay.
And David and Lindsay. David's in the military. He's a pilot for the Navy. And they have our first and only grandbaby right now, Michelle, who's a little over 2. And then they just shared with us that they're pregnant.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they had 2 miscarriages. So this is
Rainbow.
nervous for... Yes. So very excited, but they're too far away. They're in Washington State.
Oh.
But Lindsay's so sweet and allowed me to be... she asked me to be, because I didn't want to be one of those mother-in-laws, especially at labor and delivery, oh, I'm going to be in there. She asked me to be in there, so I was so honored.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Yes. So I definitely am hoping that I can be there too for this next baby. Yeah. If not, then not in the delivery room, at least helping out with Michelle,
Yeah.
So
when is that baby coming?
February.
Okay, so she's about halfway, is that?
She's like 13
okay,
weeks.
So not quite.
So it's Friday, so every Friday it's when it turns, so 13 weeks today.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah, grandbabies are the best.
Well, I don't know, I'm not quite there yet.
No.
But I understand that they're the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are, yeah.
Oh, Deb, well, this has been so great. I'm excited to just share this conversation with the listeners and offer encouragement. And I know that you can't necessarily share your faith with the patients that come in all the time, but I think it makes a difference that you have the Lord as your center, and you are reaching these people, and I just am so thankful for women like you doing the work that you do.
Thank you.
So
and thanks for doing this and, bringing out the awareness of pregnancy and infant loss in October.
Yes, it is near and dear to my heart, and so, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Deb has such a sweet, kind, compassionate, empathetic spirit. I just love that we have her as a resource to serve the women who are entering this club that none of us would pick, this bereaved mother, infant loss, mom community. And I'm just so grateful for women like Deb who are there to serve. I can imagine that she's an incredible support to the women that she encounters at the hospital. Something that I love that she said was that silence is really important. And often when she goes into the room, she doesn't say anything. She just sits there. And by opening up the floor to silence, it actually allows the mom space to start talking. And I think when we're sitting with a friend in grief, often we want to talk and fill that space because it makes us feel better. But if we can embrace what feels a little bit like tension and a little bit like awkwardness, it actually opens the floor for the grieving individual to open up their heart and to start speaking and hopefully take a few steps, those first few steps towards healing. It also meant a lot to me that Deb talked about the innate need to care for your baby even after they've passed away. And I know that I felt that so much. After Evie, the only way I could describe it was love inertia. Like I had all this momentum built up and all this love for this baby, and then she wasn't there, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to direct this energy, this love energy. And so for Deb to actually put it into words and say that this is normal, that actually just put a little bit of healing in my heart, even 6 years later, 3 years later, after Evie and Charlie. It just made me feel good to know that I wasn't the only mom out there who felt that kind of tension. Everything Deb and I mention here are going to be in the show notes, sarahrieke.com/podcast. And I'm going to include posts on things that I've done to commemorate my babies over the years. And then I'll also curate a list of things that other moms have done. Just a list that can help you come up with some ideas if you're looking for ways to celebrate your baby and remember your baby. If you follow me on Instagram, I just hope that you've been able to check out the Arm in Arm Insta Story highlights. I've been adding to it every day, and it's basically just what I'm calling it is Arm in Arm 31 Days of Solidarity for Infant Loss Mothers. And it's just a list basically of quotes, really raw, honest, vulnerable quotes from women who have lost babies. Just to do the very thing that it says is just to offer solidarity and empathy in what it feels like to be plunged into that depth of pain and sadness, just to make you feel like you're a little bit less alone. All right, so I ask every guest who comes on the show something that they're looking forward to, and today Deb shared about her grandbaby. She's getting a new grandbaby in February. That's very exciting. Something that I am looking forward to is partnering with Through the Lens podcast to bring you a Facebook Live video 1 week from today, Tuesday, October 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we are going to do an AUA, an Ask Us Anything episode. So I hope that you will submit your questions. If you aren't familiar with Through the Lens podcast, they are a wonderful podcast that hosts gospel-centered conversation on hope in the heartache. And Kristen was my guest last week. She's one of the co-hosts. Holly is the other co-host, and she was on my show actually back, I think it was episode, Oh, it was one of the early ones. It might have even been in the single digits, but 6, 5, 13, those numbers come to mind. I really should have checked it before I started talking, but she's in one of the early ones, sharing her story as well. And so I'm partnering with these lovely ladies, and we are going to bring you a Facebook Live video 1 week from today. I hope you'll be able to tune in, and I hope that you will submit your questions. I will put links on where you can submit them, email, Facebook, or Instagram. And if you're wondering what kinds of questions to ask, really just anything. If you are curious about any details of our stories, if you have ever wondered anything about pregnancy and infant loss in general, or if you yourself have experienced pregnancy and infant loss and you are wanting to kind of process certain aspects of it, please, those are all things that we would love to answer for you and love to kind of talk through with you. So make sure to submit your questions if you have one. All right, friends, well, that is all from me for today. A big thanks again to Deb for coming on the show. Love chatting with her. Love having that connection with her now. And of course, as always, I hope you found this episode to be inspiring and encouraging to help you walk well in the story that God has written, especially for you. Bye, guys.